Good day everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today we are looking at teleportation in our XR Unity project. As you can see, I made a bit of a difference to the scene, but yet today we will be looking at teleportation for your player so you can move around in the environment. It's pretty easy to do, and there is no script involved except for one script that we're going to be implementing to actually hide the raycast and the line. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is you're going to go and select your raycast rig. We're going to need two systems. I have my notes on the side, so to ensure that I don't get lost or give you false information. So we're going to need two systems for the teleportation and one system for the rotation of the character. So first thing that we're going to be doing is implementing the rotation of the player, and it's going to be snap turn provider base device based, and this will basically just control the snapping of your character so you can rotate itself without rotating himself in real life. As you can see, it needs a local system. That's the system that we're going to implement in a second, and it's going to be needing an input that would be your primary 2D axis. It's the main joystick that's on the controllers, the small joystick that's there, that's the primary 2D axis. So the second thing that we're going to be implementing is the locomotion system, and this will handle the locomotor system. The last thing we're going to be needing is the teleportation provider, and this will reference to the system. The XR rig that's needed to be referenced here is the main script. You don't need to fill anything out in the system because it will automatically connect all the dots, get all the systems that's needed. The only thing that you do need to disable is the enable turn around. So it will flip your character 80 degrees. I normally turn this off because I have experimented with it, and when I'm trying to turn my character around, it sometimes doesn't turn me 45 degrees, but actually just swipes me around. So it's best to turn that off. The activation timeout is the time amount that you can actually activate the script and turn your character, the time between those two activations. I normally just turn it to 0.2, and the last thing that we actually need is our controllers. So if you want this turning function to be on both of your controllers, you can put both of your controllers in there, but I just want it on the right controller. So I'm just gonna drag and drop it in there, and it will have a reference to what controller it's gonna be focused on, and also what axis. If you want to change the axis, there's secondary axis, but no one actually uses the secondary axis because it's that small dot on your controller when it comes to the Oculus. So that's all that we need on the main rig. Next thing that we're going to be needing is actually the teleportation method. So we're gonna go and implement the teleportation method, and we're gonna go through XR device based, and we are gonna grab array interactor, and we're just gonna call it teleportation array. So at the moment it is inside the world. It's it doesn't have any children. There's no child for the teleportation, but it needs to be actually a child of your main rig. And after you made it a child of your main rig, you just have to zero it out. So when we're looking at the settings on the controller, sorry, my cat is seeking attention in the background. There's a lot of settings that we can play with, but the main settings we're going to be playing with is it's going to be on the right hand, and which button it's going to be actually teleporting us. So I'm going to be using the secondary button. Don't use any of the touch controllers, because it will just whack you around just because your finger is on the button. So we're gonna be implementing secondary button. All the rest of the settings here is not needed, except for the axis to press through threshold, and we're just gonna be changing that to 0.2. This is how far the button has to actually be pressed in to activate it, and it will teleport you once you actually let the button go. And this is going to be of importance for the script that we're going to be using later on. You don't need to change anything else in the script. All these ones that's actually empty, it will automatically add all information that is required. So with the raycast interaction system, there is a few settings that we're going to be changing here. One setting that we're going to be changing is we don't want the raycast to actually interact with any of our UI. We mainly just want it for teleportation. We don't want it to force grab any objects in our scene, so we can also be taking that off. Any other settings that we're going to be changing is the line type. So there is 3 line types. For one is a straight line. It will literally just shoot a straight line out of your controller. If you would like to use that for your project, you can keep it at straight line, but we're actually going to do a projectile curve. It will just create a normal curve for the raycast. The value that I've found that really works for my type of project for the velocity was 8. You can play around with these settings by yourself to find the perfect values for your project. The last thing that we going to be looking at is the ray mask. So at the moment, what's going on, let me just get up here and actually grab my Oculus. Gonna press play. So the thing that's going on right now, it's raycasting its values on it's raycasting on all the objects that's in the scene that is layered, that has a layer. As you can see, if I point at one of the interactable objects and actually press the button to grab it, it does do that, and it grabs it at a distance, doesn't bring it actually to the hand. And we want to actually fix that by using a different layer for the teleportation. And as you can see, there's the curve. That is the buttons that you'll have to, that's the values that you'll have to play with based on distance, and also the curve amount. So that's just a value that you can play with. And just put it back down. Okay. Exit out of that. So the curve is again that values. The raycast mask is a value that we're actually going to be using to ensure that we don't interact with the other objects and actually just teleport or interact with the floor. To do that, we're actually going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call it movement. I'm going to go back to the floor object, and we're just going to be changing the layer to movement. Now we're going to go back to the raycast, and on the raycast script we're just going to be moving all the masks and just primarily put it on the move mask. And that's the last thing that we're gonna have to do. If your selective active trigger is on static change, you should change it back to change it to static. Basically what this means is if you actually press on the button outside of the location where it's not with the mask, with the movement mask, and you bring it in to the movement marks and actually let go of the button, it will still teleport you. If you're using the static charge, it will only teleport you when you actually start on the floor. Otherwise it won't teleport you on that mask. Okay, that is the basic settings for teleportation on the player side. Now let's look at the floor, because at the moment the thing that makes it impossible to move right now is it does throw the raycast out, but it doesn't actually see exactly what objects we need to teleport to, except for the layer mask. But there's actually a script needed on the floor for it actually to work, and that is a teleport area. And this script also needs a collider. It doesn't have to be a trigger or anything like that, it just needs a collider so we can get that data from. There is no settings that you have to change in the collider itself, but there is a few settings that you might need to bring your attention to. One setting is the colliders. As you can see, there's no colliders in the system, but if you use the teleportation area on the same game object as the glider, it will automatically add the glider to the list. But if you actually have multiple gliders and you don't want to make multiple scripts, you can actually go and reference, going back to the floor, I can actually go and reference that glider's that glider as also a location where you can teleport to. So you don't actually have to constantly add a script to multiple game objects. You can actually just make like an empty game object and throw this on the empty game object, and it will automatically pick up, and you can just throw all the gliders in this list and it will automatically use it like that. That's about all the settings that you can get from this glider. If you don't actually have from that script, if you don't actually have any game objects in the scene that actually you want to use for teleportation just as a testing area, another thing that you can do is you can click on plus, go to XR panel, and you can go and grab the teleportation area. As you can see, there's two teleportation types, teleportation area and the teleportation anchor. I'll talk about the anchor in a second, but you can just bring in the teleportation area and then just zero it out, except I'm gonna do 0.001 just set it above the ground, and this cube will then reference all the locations where you can teleport to. Just remember to change its mask to movement. But like I said, you can also just add it to an empty game object and reference all the gliders and make sure that all the gliders is under the movement layer. So let's quickly talk about the anchoring XR system, teleportation anchor. So what the teleportation anchor basically is, it works like a teleportation area, except for you can't actually move around in that area. It still gives you like the 6 degrees of freedom, but it doesn't give you the capacity to actually move or teleport in that whole square. Actually bring it close. You won't be able to actually move around in this area. It will bring you to a fixed point in the middle where this blue cube is, and it will anchor you to that location. You can still move around 360 after 6 degrees of freedom, but you won't be able to actually teleport anywhere on this glider. It will automatically just snap you to the middle where this box is. And a place where this would actually benefit, just going to change the layer to movement layer. A place where this is benefited is at maybe like consoles, where you want the player to able to actually be fixed to the small area right in front of the console, and then after they've done whatever they need to be doing for the console, they can just keep on teleporting. You can use both systems at the same time, it doesn't really matter. It's gonna scale it down to 0.1, 0.1, and then I'm just gonna be moving it here -2, and 3. Quickly look at the teleportation anchor settings. Like I said, you can also create colliders, and the anchor point, as you can see if I drop down, is an anchor point that you can actually customly position wherever you need it. Just make sure that you actually reference the anchor point in here. Another setting that we have to look out for is, where is it? Can't see it right now, but it's fine. Just rotate the anchor point where the x-axis actually looks in the direction that you want the character to look at. Stupid planes. Sorry, I was just waiting for the plane to go over. So quickly, just to look at all the settings, it's almost the exact same as the teleportation area, except you have one extra game object reference of just having the anchor. Okay, let's quickly test it. As you can see there, the white line is that you can teleport there. And as you can see, I can teleport around on this area. And everything's fine. And if you actually use the thumbstick to rotate yourself around, you can see I rotate, and this is the teleportation anchor. If I press here, I won't go to that point as my center point, I'll actually go to the anchor position, where the anchor position is, and then I can interact with the console, and then after I've been fully anchored I can just move out again using the normal teleportation. So that's the basics of teleportation in the XR system. The next thing that we are going to be working on is the visuals. So the last thing that we have to actually work on is the visuals of the raycast, the line renderer that you actually see that comes out of the controller. As you can see, there are two scripts that actually controls the visuals of the raycast. One is the line renderer itself, and the last one is the script for the line renderer. You will see there's two values for colors. You can change the colors of each value to suit your needs. As you can see, when the teleportation area is valid, I want to make it from this type of color sheet, from white to blue, and if it's invalid it will go from white to red. And I will show you a bit later about how the red looks. So the last thing that we're quickly going to be looking at for the teleportation is creating like a small platform for the location of a teleportation that you can actually replace with any object with material on it, and that is the reticle. For that, I'm just going to be bringing a basic 3D model of a cylinder, zero it out, take its collider off, gonna do a 0.5, and the height's just gonna be 0.1, and that looks fine. And this will only, I'll show you in a second how it looks. We're just gonna go back to the teleportation array we created and just put that object into the reticle. And then I'm quickly gonna show you how that looks. As you can see, it will follow my raycast around. And if I rotate it, will go with rotation. And this would automatically just keep on following your end position around, but it will disappear when when the raycast isn't valid, as you can see there. And it will come back once it is valid. So the next visual that we'll be updating is actually the raycast itself. As you can see, it doesn't matter if it's valid or invalid, or if I'm actually pressing the button or not, the raycast will automatically just constantly be there. And we don't want that. We actually want it to actually only show up when we are pressing the button to say that we want to teleport around. And that's going to be handled in a script. Put it down. Before we actually run to the script, there's something that I've realized, and that is that we can teleport right into these objects without any problem. Like I showed you, we can actually teleport to the area that's underneath the floor, and it doesn't actually interact with the cube itself. One thing that we can change is by adding it to a layer as a floor, or we can change the layer of making the movement layer a grabbable layer, and then just changing the teleportation layer as everything except for the movement layer. So I think that's what we're going to be actually doing. We can change the floor layer to default, and then we're going to take our grabbables, we're going to add a layer, and we're just going to change the movement layer to say grab layer, and then just take all the cubes and change them to grab layers. And this will, and then we just have to go to the teleportation array, the XR array interactable, and then just change grab layer to everything except for grab layer. And this will basically just swipe it around where the raycast will actually hit the table without raycasting through it. It will also work for walls and everything like that. So the last thing that we're going to be doing is the script. So I'm going to go to my scripts player and I'm going to create a new script. And we're just going to call it locomotion controller. And we're going to be adding the locomotion controller to the XR rig. Going to throw it on there. And we are going to open it. So I'm going to be removing the start. So the first thing that we actually need is a reference to the XR system. So we're going to be doing a using Unity engine dot XR, and to be more exact about what XR system we're going to be using, we're going to go to interaction. No. Yeah, interactions dot XR tool toolkit. And this is the main system that we can be using to get all the values of the controllers and also the buttons being pressed. So with that in place, we also need reference to our controllers. We're gonna need a reference to the teleportation array. If this is where our code might be a bit different. As you can see, I'm only using one teleportation array, and it is fixed to the right hand. If you're actually adding the teleportation array to both hands, then you're gonna just duplicate the array and change on the controller side just to left hand and then whatever button you want to use to teleport around. And in the code side, this is also one of the locations that where it's going to be a bit different, because you actually need a reference to the game object, and if you're using multiple, you're just going to be referencing multiple, and the script's just going to be multiple, but I'll show you in a second exactly what can be multiple. First thing that we're going to be needing is a public XR controller, and this is gonna be right controller. Array. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just keeping it simple because I only have one. This is one value that you'll have to duplicate for both hands if you're using both hands. But as I'm just using one, the next thing I'm going to be using is a public input helper dot button. This will get reference to the controller's button. I'll show you exactly. teleportation action button, and this would reference to, if we go to the teleportation ray, this would reference to this button. It will manually get that button. It would throw this up, and you can just put in the right button in there. The last thing that we're going to be referencing to is a public float, and we're going to call it activation threshold, and we just can give it a value of 0.01. And this value should always be greater than the active press threshold. That's why we changed the active press threshold to 2, because we actually need the 0.1 to actually activate the line before the teleportation actually starts. The last object that we're actually going to be needing is another public game object, and this would be the just gonna call it object reticle, and this object would be the reticle object. And this is all the variables that we're going to be needing for our script. We're going to do all the scripts in the void update, but we're actually going to make another class, and it's going to be a public bool for a custom formula we're going to be creating. That's going to be called check to active. You can also activate it if you want. Doesn't really matter about the name, just remember it. And we're gonna have a reference to the XR controller, and we're just gonna call it controller. It's a custom variable. It's a variable that we have created that only applies in the class. You won't be able to get it in outside of this class where it's going to be needed. So we're going to go inside the class, and we're going to do input helper dot is pressed, and we're going to need a few values. As you can see, we're going to need the controller, we're going to need the button, we're going to need the value, the value that would be an output, and then also how far value of the button is actually pressed in for that value to be true or false. So we already got all of that information up there. So we're going to do a R controller array. Oh wait, no, we're actually gonna already got it there. Gonna do a controller dot input device for the controller, and this same value name, because we're grabbing the value from there. Then we're gonna need a teleportation action button. This value comes from above the output of the true or false. It's going to be a bool. We're just going to call it is activated. And last thing we need is the threshold, and we made it activation threshold. And just to close the custom class, we're going to do a return of is activated. The return that we're doing here is the value that's being put out by this line of code that actually checks if if the button is pressed to a certain threshold, and if it is, it will shoot out a true or false. And we're going to be needing it in the void update. So in void update, we're going to do an if statement to ensure that the controller is actually there. If the controller value is not 0, we're going to be running the code of our controller dot game object dot set active, and where we're going to get the set active value is from the check if active, and we need reference to the R controller. And it's as simple as that. The check if active is the name of the class that we created, and if you have multiple XR controllers, you'll basically just duplicate this and change the values, the XR controller value to for the left hand controller if you are actually using it in that way. Last thing that we're going to be doing is, now that we have taken care of the raycast, we actually need to make the radical to disappear as well. Otherwise we're just going to have a ball following us around where you can constantly see it. So we're going to do a object radical dot set active, and it's just going to be exactly this just again. Going back to Unity, that's a full script, but going back to the Unity engine, we quickly just need to fill out all the values, and we're gonna need I need to actually remove the left hand controller because you only have for one controller. So radical is going to be the same object as the radical in the XR interactive line visual script. The R controller array would be teleportation array that we have created. The button that we are using is the exact same as the R teleportation array button, secondary button. And just make sure this value is higher than this value, lower than the X threshold. And that's it, guys. Do a quick example. As you can see, the teleportation of the line renderer isn't there until I actually press the button, and it will bring up the line, and it will now be stopped by walls, and I can still teleport everywhere, and you won't see the radical anymore because it also deactivates once the line disappears. And that's about it, guys. That is teleportation. If you liked the video, please remember to like and subscribe for future content. I'll try in the next video to show you how the second movement system works by actually using the joysticks for movement. And I'll see you all in the next video.